Yeah.
We just not.
What do we need?
All right, it is 6 o'clock. We're going to call the meeting to order. Any additions or changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Anyone here for public comment for anything not on the agenda? There's no one here in person with us, Andrea, just so you know, other than committee members and Chris.
We usually get a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thanks, Tim, with a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, no public comment. Can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 19th? That's in your packet. Alice is moving. Tim is a second. All those in favor? Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? And anyone opposed? All right, the meeting minutes pass. So moving on to 5.1, the BUUSD policy index review. Luke, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that I think it's maybe since the last time we met, but I added a couple things to this. So if I blacked out or grayed out the boxes that weren't relevant, we wouldn't expect things to be in there. So for example, under the board policies, we wouldn't expect procedures at the schools. So I just shaded those out so that it didn't look like we had empty spaces. And then I had put a little, I guess, legend kind of thing. So SH is student handbook, FH is faculty handbook, WS is the website, and O is other, so that as we put down where things were documented, we would be able to see. We could also link them, but that's going to take a while too. But I thought just for expediency to just be able to jot down, I can do that for Spalding. This is where they're found on the website or in the handbook. And then at least we can get some documentation of where things are or if they are operational as opposed to formally documented. So that I think is new since maybe the last time we met.
Great, yeah, thank you. Any other comments or anything about the policy index? I just continue to sort of watch the comments and action section, making sure it's lining up with the policies that are going to the board for first reading, policies that are here at the committee, and noting what's sort of here in the parking lot and if we're waiting for anything, and the updates from VSBA. Tina does a great job with this for sure. And thank you, Luke, for making those additions. That will definitely be helpful as we go along for people to just throw things in the boxes there. Okay, we're going to move on to 5.3, which is board meetings. Oh, in your packet is 5.2, which is the VSBA policy notes. So that's that little sort of cheat sheet that has information policy by policy of what we're working on. And I see it's got an edit key. That's new and fancy. Policy edit key at the top of that document shows how things are underlined, struck through, or highlighted, and so how the edits happen on the policies in the packet.
Question, may I just add something?
Yeah, please.
So what kind of started out with this, I initially called it a cheat sheet. It's more for me and Tina internally to kind of be, and for Luke as well, to be prepared for these meetings and go, wait a minute, let's share these with you guys. Now that we're putting these in the packets, first, we hope these are helpful. Also, we welcome feedback on if this, like, I wouldn't mind at the end of this meeting before we adjourn, just reviewing if this document was helpful, both in terms of getting it, days before to look at for the purpose of this meeting now. We welcome feedback on it. because we want these meetings to be efficient.
Right.
And
I have a quick note on these. So like when it says underlined, could we just have it underlined? Because, you know, a person not knowing what to look for. I mean,
Yeah.
and you could just strike through the strike through,
Okay.
highlight the highlight.
Like the actual words, so it's.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the
What do
key
you mean,
itself.
in the key?
In the key. In the key. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because in the edits, they're underlined and stricken out.
No,
In-
but
Oh,
in
yeah,
in the
showing
key,
it in the
so you know
key.
what. So someone who doesn't know
Straight
what
Yeah.
what is happening.
So underline the word underline,
Yep.
strike through the word strike through, and
Okay.
highlight the word highlight.
Yep.
That's easy enough.
Okay. It's definitely, this document is definitely helpful for me when I'm prepping for the meeting. It's sort of a heads up as I'm going policy through policy. And previously I would go to the VSBA website and look at all of those individually. So to have it all right there is
Try to do
definitely
one-stop
helpful in prep. Yeah. Andrea?
Just want to check with Giuliano so that I can mark the voting correctly. Were you here when we voted on the minutes, Giuliano?
No, I was not.
Okay, thanks.
I think it's a helpful tool too, because when I get it, that's the first thing I look at the agenda, then I go to that, and then I look at policy. You can still read the whole policy, but I mean, it focuses me instead of like getting lost and like.
Yeah, like what am I supposed to be looking at here?
Or
Right.
trying to
What's the problem?
cross-reference back and forth to the prior
Yeah.
one or the VSBA thing, like, that just.
And it's helpful now that when they're making changes, they're putting the comments about like, what did they
Yeah.
change and why did they
Yeah,
change
no,
it?
that's-
So then we're
the
not
why.
guessing.
That's one thing that's always a big question. Why, especially with existing policy, why are we doing this? And so
Yeah.
having that is helpful. They don't say we have to necessarily follow it all the time,
Yeah.
but at least we understand the rationale
Right.
to the change.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's very helpful, Chris.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to 5.3, which is A20 in your packet. And this is a policy that has been, was recently updated in just July of last year, 2022. And the change here is that we are after some board discussion, we're moving to have all meetings, committees and board meetings here at Spalding High School instead of rotating schools. So you can see the strike throughs, the getting rid of the table, and just the highlighting of the Spalding High School Library as the place where all the meetings will be. Any questions or discussion about that? All right. Can we get a motion to bring this to the board for first reading?
Yes. So
Alice
moved.
for the first.
Second.
Tim with the second.
I don't care. Pick one.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so that will go to board for first reading. All right, the next one is 5.4, which is English learners. And you will see in your packet that we have the current version that we have at the BUUSD that was adopted in 2021, along with a copy of the required policy from the VSBA. And the edits are there. And from our policy notes, the note from the VSBA is VSBA has not provided a link to explain changes, but the changes reflected in policy are from comparison with the VSBA version. So minor changes in some of the formatting and some of where the definitions sort of show up in different places in the policy.
I'm
Yeah,
just confused about the procedure of the two documents. Just wondering about that.
Yeah,
So the one with the underlining,
yes,
and D is crossed out.
yep.
Okay, so which one is the current version? and which
So,
one
yep, the one that says BUUSD on the top, that's our current.
Okay.
It shows you right here, you look at this graph, it shows you the first reading, but
It
that's
was
what's
adopted a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
so that's the one that's current policy.
Okay.
And then the edits that are on there are what is reflected in the,
Stop it.
Alice's phone is talking to me.
Yes.
Are the edits that's from the VSBA version,
The
sort of
next page.
transposed onto ours, so that you can see how
Thank you.
ours will look different. Yeah, no problem.
It is a weird edit because they crossed out, they actually take the same language, they just added above it. So what they're trying to do is make it an and to get rid of it. I don't know why they cross it out.
Yeah.
I had a whole question about this, and it goes back, it's the same question I had in 2021. Is this a little bit of overkill? Because I, for example, don't understand, like B.I., who, under who, is a Native American or Alaska Native or a native resident of an outlying area. What's the definition of an outlying area? Is it?
Orange.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. That's what I said.
Outside of Barry.
That's what I said to Robert. I said, is that Williamstown? You know, but I can give a perfect
Yeah.
example of that. I have family, first cousins, whose families chose to continue to speak German in the household. My father chose not to. And they live over in Winnipesaukee. They would meet two of those three requirements, you know, kind of thing. And I'm saying, haven't we got this covered by some who is not a native, whose native language is other than English? I'm just concerned that we're getting too far into the weeds, and it might get us in more trouble than we really need.
I mean, when I look at the VSBA policy and it, on the chart that gives the legal references, like one of those things there is the definition of English learner. So
Right.
I'm imagining that's straight out of the statute, and that's why it is what it is.
Is this is this required or, let's see,
It is required.
required.
Yeah.
I just saw that, sorry.
See, so I think, I just think it's got it covered, and we offer English language learning to anyone who isn't proficient, you know, outside of the routine instructional classes. It's just something that I see as being a little overkill.
I mean, yeah. I hear you, and I don't want, unless we are getting it looked at by our lawyers, I don't want us to mess with the
Right.
definitions of what's the, you know, from the
Required.
law, the definition, right, if it's a required policy, definition of an English learner.
Okay,
I didn't see if this is a statute that can't come out there, Title 16 right now, though. You know where this would be? Is there a citation to?
It says, 20 USC
Oh,
7801 parentheses 20.
no, that's federal.
yeah.
Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act, 64.
I mean, my gut would be to keep it
Yeah.
aligned with
Agree.
what the VSBA is putting out.
And they just, adopted this a month ago, or updated it.
Their updates,
Updated
okay.
it, well, almost 2 months ago.
It's not a big deal, but it was just something that struck me a year ago also when we were doing, or 2 years ago when we were doing this. Why so much?
Mhm. So one of the things, Alice, that you brought up to me about the homeless policy
Right.
also is, in the homeless policy that the board approved for first reading last week, there's a word in there, migratory,
Mhm.
and Alice had brought that up as like, should we use migratory? Should we use transient as one, less pejorative, if there is a pejorative
Right.
piece to it? And I noted that in this policy under 3C, also they use the word migratory. and one of the things that I had said to Alice over email is, you know, the UVM extension has a program, the Vermont Migrant Education Program. And so, you know, they work with schools around providing supports and supports to families. And they use that word migrant. And so I wondered,
Yeah.
like, if
They also had a
it's-
really good statement in there that begins with, and I transferred to notes, but for some reason it's not coming up. It doesn't like me right at the moment. But it begins with children and youth who relocate.
Uh-huh.
That seemed to be more, it captured more of the whole picture of what we're trying to do
Mhm.
with that homelessness, because there are the students who, for whatever reasons that are under the 1A of that they're moving for whatever reasons, employment, lack of housing, or that they move from community to community, and they're more like transient students because they often come back to us as well. And then you have the students who, because they are connected with agriculture and their families are connected with agriculture, that they move throughout the state and maybe even go to another state and then come back seasonally. And just to capture that a little better without just saying that they're migrants. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So
And I like that line from the UVM piece.
yeah, but it is more than just relocating. Like, it's not just a family, like we just moved to a different town.
Yeah, no, it's the kids who, because their parents, their families are associated with working on farms.
Right, that's what I'm
Involved in
saying.
agriculture.
So if we took out the word either from this policy or from the other policy, if we're taking out the word migratory or migrant, how do we still, I mean, we could say something along the lines of relocation due to agricultural pursuits or
I like
something like
that.
that.
I kind of thought of that too, relocation due to employment in the agricultural
Mhm,
environment or something like that.
mhm, mhm.
I think, I just find this is just me, I find migrant and migratory to be an old term, that doesn't always have the best, picture.
Connotation.
Yeah, connotation.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And are you suggesting that, what difference does it make? What the source of the different language or the reason for the different language?
Right.
Just if it's other than English, you've got to.
This is all, I'm looking
Is
at
that
the,
right?
sorry.
Yeah, it kind of rolls over one to the other, but that particular piece was out of the students who are homeless
Oh, yeah,
policy, which
right.
we talked about the last time.
I just pulled up the statute that we see in the DSBA section.
Yeah.
It refers to 20 USC section 780120, which is
Yeah.
the definition of English learner and migratory. That's this language is straight from the statute and talks
Okay.
about. It talks about the Alaska Native or Native resident from outlying areas, comes from an environment where language other than English has had a significant
Right.
impact on individuals' level of English language proficiency. 3, who is migratory, whose native language is language other than English and who comes from an environment where language. So that's all from federal statutes. So I
Okay.
don't think we can, this is why it's required because it's,
So we
Yeah,
should just
I-
leave it there.
Yeah,
as
Yeah, I
is.
would suggest we leave it there,
it
given.
probably doesn't make a lot of sense for necessarily fit Vermont per se, but I don't think we can mess with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Okay,
fine.
okay.
It just was worth talking about.
Okay, any further discussion, or does anyone want to make a motion to have this go to the board for first read?
Some of
Juliana with a first, Alice with a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, and Tim, yes? Anyone opposed? All right, we'll send that to the board for first reading. And now we're gonna move on to 5.5, which is B20, personnel recruitment, selection, appointment, and background check. And this was one that we talked about last month and we had some questions about some of the language. And what you'll see in the policy notes in the packet are the notes that came back from our legal counsel. So this went to them, and they came back with their recommendations. So that can help inform our discussion here. And what you'll see in the packet is the BUUSD B20 with the edits and additions. So there's quite a few changes, especially under recruitment, selection, and appointment.
Yeah.
But all consistent with what Sean.
Yes, consistent with what
His
Sean's
advised
feedback
us.
was. Yep. Yep, Tom?
I had a question, a number of questions, but one of them is, this is a recruitment selection appointment. Background check. Okay, so, isn't there another area of school policy or procedure where there's training, in-service training, I think sometimes called? Is that someplace else in this, index? In other words, why are we sticking? Sometimes I wonder if, lawyers may be accused of this too. If you've got the job of, a surgeon is going to recommend surgeon. If you're a hammer, you're going to look for a nail. So we're going to add. Let's do non-discrimination, bias, and anti-racism training. We're going to put it in this policy here, but isn't there some other area of the policy or procedures where training required? Why is it being suggested it be here?
Luke?
We do have a professional development policy. I think it's is that maybe 21? Yeah, B21 is professional development. I mean, you could argue that it's placed there, but I think that professional development kind of assumes that people have already been hired and are part of the staff, and this feels like it's part of onboarding before you're actually officially working with kids or in the system. We make sure that you have this training, so it feels like it's a pre-training as opposed to professional development for folks that are already here, and maybe that's a subtle difference, but
Yeah.
hey, Chris, we're running into that issue again.
Oh,
See, Luke, it is you. It is you, Luke.
I think it is me. I think it is.
seriously, Luke. Hang on. All right. For those of us who were not here last week, we've been having trouble with our audio. Assured. Is that helping, guys?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, how we doing now? Okay. All right. So Luke, just be quiet, okay? No. It is weird though. I think Andrew, you are right. It did happen last time too. But I think it's just important to note that Luke is right on. This is about kind of getting in the door. These things that are we need to have in place, whereas the professional development is sort of ongoing throughout folks' career or their time with us.
I understand it's be more persons say, I'm fresh out of college, first job, getting hired here. I would not necessarily have this training, so you want to make sure they have the training before I actually start the class.
Right. We don't know.
Yeah, then someone comes to me with transfer from Essex, and maybe I've had this, maybe I haven't.
Could even be a veteran teacher from another state or who knows.
And then once they're in, they have these annual.
So does that mean that this optional statement here, if it's referring to what Luke talked about, does it need to say something like prior to commencing classroom activity or something like that, that the BUUSD will ensure that the employees receive training in non-discrimination, bias, and anti-racism?
Well, again, we're going with Sean, our legal counsel,
Yeah,
Well, he addresses it in the policy
Yep.
key there, right?
Yep.
It says last sentence, I assume that's what he's talking about. It is optional. It sounds like the district is already doing this. Is that a reference to this
I believe so, yes, that's what I thought it was.
last sentence of the first portion there?
Right, and because then he says basically the rest is sort of, more procedure.
And it
than
says, yeah,
policy.
and it says it's the current practice. Yeah.
Right. Said was, I would add that if you only do the training at the beginning of the year, you may want to add some version of it for someone who joins mid-year. So would we put in a qualifier like prior to employment?
Yeah.
yeah.
To mean any
Right.
time, for the employment.
If this is being done now, what does it look like? What kind of, who does the training?
Well, currently our human resources folks do it during onboarding, but we are looking to, it's quite an overwhelming task, especially with the hiring kind of year-round process now. So we're looking to kind of tighten that up, but currently it's our human resources folks.
Yeah, it's not an area that is uncontroversial. I mean, let me just look it up. You know, people have been accused of, they have to get a handle on their whiteness. I mean, I don't know what the flavor is of this training. It just seems to me that sometimes we should deal with conduct. I mean, racism is a bad thing and it shouldn't be permitted. And that's the lesson. And then we deal with people conduct, and people should be treated fairly and regardless of the color of their skin or their creed, and I don't know what more needs to be said. So,
Well,
I mean,
people,
John and I have gone through some training, as attorneys, and some of it's a bit out there.
I think the thing is people are coming to employment here from all kinds of backgrounds. So I don't think we can assume
Can't assume any of it.
that anybody would have any understanding of anything, just based on, oh, we all get it, or what anti-racism is, or we all get what it means to discriminate against people, because we just can't say that. We don't know what people's trainings are. We don't know what their backgrounds are.
I'm suggesting, I don't know that it really needs a training curriculum.
Yeah, I disagree.
what I'm
I definitely
suggesting.
disagree.
Yeah, it's a kind of like, it's to cover us. We really,
Lawsuits.
yeah, we really have to have shown that we're doing this.
Luke?
Let's test this and see if I can break the system again. I want to point out that even though it does say anti-racism, that's the third of the three terms. And we use Vector Solutions, which is, a kind of a national clearinghouse of different trainings. Everything from bloodborne pathogens to these topics, non-discrimination, bias, those kinds of things. But that's not specific to anti-racism. There is an anti-racism training within those, but bias and non-discrimination also covers everything from gender to sexuality to identity to special education, ability, SES. So when it's talking about non-discrimination and bias, it's not just around color, race, that kind of stuff. It's a broader scope. I think by them adding anti-racism in on that list, it makes it feel like that's the focus. But those topics are covered in a much broader range than what this might insinuate. And I think as board members, those are just trainings that are available. They're usually 5-minute clips or so. They're pretty good little trainings that we can make those available if people want to review them.
Thanks, Luke.
So should that be prefaced with something like prior to employment? That would
Yeah.
clarify it.
Yeah, I think if we added prior to employment to the end of that sentence.
Right.
Wouldn't change the spirit.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we scratch out the optional part
How can
if we're
you
making it.
make it required prior to their employment?
Well, you hire them, they accept, you have the trainings they have to require before they start working with kids.
So, yeah, but as soon as they're hired, that means they're employed. And what you're trying to do is, sorry to be.
Yeah,
I
no,
think what
yeah,
you're trying
no,
to
go
do is
ahead.
you're trying to do it before they're actually in the classroom.
Right.
So they're hired, but before they're because you can't really require them to do it. before they
We made
apply.
an offer to them. They're all ready to roll, but they've got to go through this onboarding process to include
So
this
this is,
training.
yeah, so, okay.
So would we say as part of the onboarding process instead of prior to employment?
Because you don't do the background check, then hire them, then they do the background check.
Well, the background check is.
Probably part of it.
Last cut.
Oh, wait, you mean the criminal background check? Yeah. I'm sorry that you meant doing like references and all that. Yeah, right. That's all part of the process. And that's the thing that can slow things down the most at times.
So would we instead say as part of the BUUSD onboarding process?
That, I think that could work. I mean,
I mean, I'm not trying, I, as someone who's not in the school system, when I
Yeah.
hear employment, I'm
Yeah.
thinking
You've
prior
got
to
it.
employment, it doesn't make sense to me.
Right,
That's
it's
all.
not
'Cause
before we're
I
paying
understand
you
the
to like
concept
do
is you want
things,
them, you
right?
don't want them in the classroom before they have all this stuff done.
Mhm.
But when I hear them tell me they're been offered, they accepted, but to me, that means they're. contract.
Mhm.
But maybe just me, I'm just saying as an outsider, this didn't make sense to me, but you guys.
Yeah, I
makes
mean,
sense
that's a fair point, yeah. Andrea?
As I recall, there's usually like a window and they say you must complete the training, say within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, something like that, if that makes sense.
Employment
So-
conditions doing this.
they have to go through the onboarding process before they can officially start. So, in other words, if you've been hired to teach second grade, before we can have you in the classroom, we have to have a completed background check, the whole onboarding process. So, this would be part of that.
So,
I think it's part of completion of the onboarding,
Yeah,
the USD onboarding process. This is an easy, it won't change the spirit of this.
and if it's a 10-minute loop, on the computer, and then there's someone,
Yeah, it's,
someone from the human resources or an administrative assistant can just initial that they saw this person sit and do that 5-minute loop
right,
on the
the way they
computer.
do everything else, right?
Yeah,
So, okay, if we could get rid of the optional part and end that sentence with as part of the BUUSD onboarding process. Does that
yeah.
work better?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, I just was like,
No,
I didn't understand.
it's totally
so-
fine.
that's why we're here.
It's
okay.
And then the other thing that I saw under selection, there's a section there that says choose, and it's about the cost of the background checks, fingerprints, etc. It says either the prospective employee or the school district.
Mhm.
So is it routinely, Chris, in those situations, people are paying themselves or we're paying?
Yes.
So
We were making some exceptions to help with paraeducators.
Yeah.
But for professional positions, it is on the prospective employee.
Okay, so we'll select that prospective employee as that edit.
I have a couple of things.
Yeah, go ahead.
On page 2, in the recruitment section, well, first referring back to the minutes, it says, brief discussion was held regarding recruitment, referring to historical inequity.
Right.
And so I don't know if the policy notes addressed it. Maybe I missed it.
Legal counsel, yes.
Is that mentioned there?
So what for that section, yeah,
But it's still there. And I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but
right,
in reviewing a criminal background check, the district will consider issues of historical inequity.
yeah, so I noted,
I think it's still pretty vague.
I noted that he responded with no issue with the definition section. And then with the exception of the first sentence in the selection section, it appears the recruitment, selection, and appointment sections are more procedure than policy. The policy is already expressed above.
That's separate from
Right.
policy.
So that's not a policy issue, is that the point?
The policy itself really is this like first section here before the definitions.
Right.
And then these other parts are more procedural in nature.
So are we saying we're not gonna address those?
And I would just say if there were a candidate in
Yeah.
that situation and we are getting a background check, I mean, I would basically try to put into context for anybody that there could be extenuating circumstances. And, we would talk to that person and hear them out, whether they're in that category or not. So,
And I think it's an attempt to have a diverse workforce, so that for our students that come from any variety of diverse backgrounds, that they might see someone that reflects their identity in the classroom or throughout the school.
I'm sure they're doing due diligence to not, I don't know, single people out or exclude folks based on that stuff. It's so highly unlikely anyway, but.
Yeah.
And this may be policy, I mean, not policy, procedure, but, background checks, not an automatic bar, in one way or another. And then, no person convicted of a sexual offense requiring registration on the Vermont Comprehensive Sex Offender Registry. I just want to see if I understand that. You probably are well aware that someone who is placed on the registry can be removed from the registry.
Mm-hmm.
But if they could have a conviction that would come up in the check that would, so they're not necessarily on the registry, they just have a conviction that would warrant registration.
Mhm.
So I suppose that's a automatic. Am I understanding correctly?
If they
Have a conviction that
oh, for sure.
could place them on the registry.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. And does the, maybe I should know this, but does the abuse registry, maybe that's written right into the law. If you're on the abuse registry, you're not necessarily convicted of a sex crime. So if you're on the abuse registry, is that a disqualifying? I would think it should be.
If we were to find out about that, the answer would be yes.
Is that part of, maybe we talked about this last time, is that part of the record check? In other words, there's a record check, and in the record check, you find out whether someone's on the registry. In the employment.
I understand that those issues would pop up. Yes, in the background check.
Yes. I mean, this doesn't say, and if you come up on the registry, I don't see it here.
My understanding of the registry is that it's under Title 33.
You can't.
It's not public, but schools are one of the people that actually have access to it. It's very limited to its access. It's because for people, children, and it's also for the elderly too. Abuse to the elderly, so beyond for either one. Yeah, vulnerable adults,
Right.
vulnerable population. So, I always thought that was something schools had access to. Look it up again, but.
I know if those things pop up, this is not anything that has, at least in my experience, if it does, that would preclude you from.
Yeah, this doesn't say that I see it. It says if you come up on if you're, someone convicted of an offense that would place you on the registry, whether you're on the registry or not, you couldn't be employed. It says right here, no person convicted of a sexual offense requiring registration shall be employed, period. My question is do we need to say, or on the abuse registry? Or is that just so understood? It's not there. I just wonder why that's omitted. The notion that if you're on the abuse registry, you're not going to be hired.
Luke, do you have something to address about this?
Yeah, there's multiple registries. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. There's any substantiated abuse, neglect charges, and sex offense. I want to say that should probably say and or sex offense, because when we talk about registries, there's also the vulnerable adults registry that may not be sexual, but there can still be abuse and neglect in there. So that very first part of the sentence that says information through any available abuse registry, that's because there's more than one abuse registry. There's the sex offender registry, but there's also vulnerable adults or others that are not necessarily that, through DCF that don't require sex crimes. That's a different type of registry. So I think at the very least we should say and or.
Yeah, what section are you saying Luke is the and or?
That first sentence. So the superintendent, number 3, selection number 3, the superintendent shall also request information through any available abuse registry, because there's multiple abuse registries, to determine whether there are any substantiated abuse / neglect charges and / or sex offense against an applicant. So that's where I'm suggesting we put in that / or. It's not currently there.
And I was referring to 5 of that same section, the selection section, if you will.
Mhm.
Paragraph 5, the last sentence says, no person convicted of a sexual offense requiring registration on the Vermont Comprehensive Sex Offender Registry shall be employed by the school district or supervisory union. And I was just asking if we should also add, or who is on the abuse registry. One of them or both of them, or if there's more than 2. Should that's also a disqualifier.
I don't either, and I think I would imagine Sean would have registered that if that was an omission here. I guess we
Wouldn't we
can
think
add it.
that would be a disqualifier, being on the registry?
Yeah,
Of course, people can be on the registry, but they can petition to be removed from the registry. Sometimes some offenses are only for, you're on the registry for a year. Some are a year, some are 3 years, a whole index for TCF. So someone could have been on the registry.
I mean, it would at least for the candidate and get a conversation going.
Yeah, if they're-
and give every,
They'd have to be on it.
Right, as opposed to someone who had been on it, right, but that's all it would have to say. I just wonder why that's not on there. We're dealing with both those topics
Yeah,
in the definition section, right? And
Right,
we dealt with before, and then we get to the part where it says this is disqualifying, why wouldn't that be disqualifying? I just-
And, right, in the second paragraph of the policy section, it does sort of address that, the piece that we're adding, that last sentence, and are subject by law to criminal record and abuse registry checks prior to or in the course of employment. So that brings up the general abuse registry checks without saying like just this registry or that
Right.
registry. So that is there in that, section of the actual policy.
But I'm just thinking, in the selection process, if it's discovered they're in the registry, I mean, that's someone not necessarily convicted of a crime at all. Wouldn't that disqualify them from employment? And if this is about employment and selection, why wouldn't it be there? I just throw that out as a question. Why wouldn't that also be there as a disqualifier? Maybe you think it doesn't have to be. But why do we have one thing and not the other? That's the question I have.
that's specific to that number 5.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
there is
Tom,
a-
you're suggesting adding, instead of just Vermont Comprehensive Sex Offender Registry, also the abuse registry? So requiring registration on the Vermont Comprehensive Sex Offender Registry or abuse registry?
Or a person who is currently on, and you'd have to mention the 2 registries, it would seem to me.
I'm just wondering if then we'd have to add others. I'd like to just run this by our legal counsel to see
Mhm.
if this is
That makes
something,
sense.
because, he basically green-lighted this.
Right,
So, I wouldn't want to add anything.
Right.
Checking with them.
so do you feel like you have if we're taking it back to him, do you feel like you have a
Yeah.
clear enough
Yeah.
understanding of what the ask is
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah,
Okay.
is the Vermont Comprehensive Sex Offender Registry, is that comprehensive enough? Do we need more?
Do we need more there of,
Yeah. Do we need to be more specific?
And if we choose
Well-
not to, does it put us in any danger by not having
Well, I
it there?
think, I think you'd explain why.
Yeah.
I can tell you there's a sex offender registry that's a product of being convicted. This is what I used to do. When I was convicted, they're on the registry. Then there's the abuse registry. It's got nothing to do with whether you're convicted or not.
And
It's not part of, it's not a,
It's
it's
not
not
even-
a criminal process.
And that
It's-
may be why it's
That's
on
what,
our.
well,
But can you
well,
find people
someone,
on it?
someone who, what's that?
Will people show up on it if you run their name through?
I don't, I assume
Yes, it's-
schools have to,
Honestly,
schools have to be told.
Schools, well, no, schools have the right, there's a very,
Yeah.
it's not public. The sex offender
Yeah.
registry is public.
Public, right?
The abuse registry is not public. Title 16, 4919, very clear about who can, but people educating school on the schools about them, you know, obviously in nursing homes. You know, I mean, people even transportation children, like I think as a coach, I even had to check the registry and go background. I'm pretty sure I have had to do both. So yeah, they're completely independent. One civil through DCF or Dale, which is, you know,
Oh, right, yeah.
for L, that's the elderly adult. So
So why don't we keep this here at committee for another month? We'll put it on for next month. And Chris, you'll run it by Sean again, that specific question. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah.
All right. We will move on to 5.6, which is C22, student athletics, clubs, and activities. And our note here on our policy notes says student athletics, clubs, and activities. The VSBA worked with the VPA, Vermont Principals Association, to merge C22, C23, and C24 into one comprehensive model policy encompassing student athletics, activities, and clubs at the elementary and secondary levels. Revisions also reflect suggestions from our equity consultant, and our being VSBA, not BUUSD. So what you have in your packet is the recommended C22 policy. We don't have it currently because it's new. And then you also have our current C23, which was adopted in 2021, and our current C24, which was adopted in 2019. So this is an attempt, if the board went through first and second readings and adopted this, then we would rescind C23 and C24. Yes.
So we're putting the policy part of itself is that first section on page 1. The rest of it is definitions, procedural things, that sort of thing.
Mhm. Any discussion, concerns? Anyone?
I didn't even talk and you guys went underwater. So
Can you hear us now?
it's starting to come back.
All right, Chris is.
Okay, now you're back.
Luke, go
Oh.
ahead.
Okay. Now you're nice and clear. Thank you. The section, our current C23, section 2D, the very, very last one, on the bottom of page 2, lists the principal may do the following with respect to student groups, as long as the same rules are applied to all student groups. Adopt rules to prohibit lewd and obscene speech, 2, 3, and 4. That's not in the proposed one, and I feel like maybe that's covered elsewhere, or there's a reason why it's removed. I'm not sure, but that feels like a pretty big one. That's that section anyway, and it's something that we've talked about in the past, when we've had groups that want to present or want to meet, and we've said, you know, we anticipate this will cause a disturbance, and that was something that we could say, hey, look, we're not going to allow this because it's right here in our policy. If that's removed, I don't know where. I'm sure there's a different way that we can say no, but it's nice having it right there very clearly spelled out that we're putting some limits in place. And I didn't see that in the proposed C22.
No audio again.
can't hear.
I have no idea what's going on with this. You guys all good now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Luke, I'm just wondering if this is really around, this could be addressed more procedurally in the student handbooks. I don't know. I don't know why that was omitted, but.
Would that be kind of considered under 2B number 4?
The meeting does not materially
Right.
and substantially interfere with the orderly conduct of educational activities in the school.
Right, Luke, if you look at 2B number 4 on page 2 of the updated one, it may address it right there.
Is that peculiar to the student-run non-curricular?
Could be.
Maybe
Yeah.
school sponsored.
Right, I noticed under administrative responsibilities, it also says the superintendent designee shall develop procedures for the determination of a school-sponsored activity. And how that's determined.
If Luke's thinking of an example, maybe it relies on this language to prohibit this kind of activity. Oh, can't hear me. Just point to his ear.
I'm not sure why it's going back.
In the mute is. Oh, that's his mute. In the upper right hand corner of his screen.
I don't know, guys, are you hearing us okay? It's good.
Okay, you just came back.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, let's hustle.
Luke, I was just saying that, I wondered if there's something in D 1 through 4 there that you're pointing to, that you're asking for a tool, in that language to prohibit that kind of activity. And you're searching that you might not have it in the new language. Is that right?
Oh gosh, can you not hear again?
He put his thumb up,
Yeah,
but we couldn't hear him.
Maybe.
He's on mute though. Look at the upper right.
Yeah.
Is that-
Yeah,
He might be typing something into the chat.
Oh,
I didn't want to talk because I don't want to jinx the system. But yes, Tom, you're correct. That language and that B4, yeah, B4 doesn't talk about requiring parental permission or lewd and lascivious lewd and obscene speech. So I feel like D is pretty specific, our old D, whereas I just don't see it nicely laid out. You kind of have to imply it in other places, which I don't really like implying stuff in policy.
Luke, could this be addressed though through the handbook for this? Given that all of this stuff is largely procedural anyway, from definitions on down. I mean,
Well, that has been our discussion for years. Like, this could just be applied in the handbook and we don't need it all in the policy. But yes, to answer your question, yeah, we could have it there. And then I think that begs the question, why is it in the handbook and not in the policy if other stuff's in the policy?
Yeah, but it's all spread out. After number 2.
We've lost you again. Luke, I'm telling you, you're the problem child here.
I honestly think it is related to his connection, because it's every time.
But you're right, Juliano, those little pieces
You
are,
just gotta hunt and search for them.
yep, so that's the parental permission piece, which is the number 4.
I mean, I'm not doing anything during in the same bucket, just so you guys know.
Okay,
And I,
what do we want to do? Yeah,
Um,
Alice?
does this link, either intrinsically or non-intrinsically with E20, which is the, the use of facilities? Because there's things in here, there were things in the student clubs and activities that addressed outside groups coming into use, and that seems to have disappeared. So that was my question, does this link with the community use of facilities? Because if a community is, a community organization is coming in to sponsor or conduct a student activity, how does that all jive together?
I mean, that wasn't, E20 wasn't referred to in this when
Right.
it was being put together, so,
But it does, so on the bottom of the first page, athletics, clubs, and activities may be school-sponsored, student-run, or number 3, community-sponsored and not related to the curriculum. So I would think if it was community-sponsored, then that's E20, community use of school facilities. So that would, you would follow that in that situation. Oh yeah, oh, it even says, this policy addresses the first 2 categories. The third is addressed in the district's policy on community use of school facilities.
there you go.
Okay, we got it.
So maybe we could just put an edit there and in parentheses put E20. So that is referenced of exactly what policy that is. Okay, do we want to make a motion to bring this to the board for first reading? Yeah, first. All right, John with a second.
That's as amended, because you were making some amendments, were you?
The only amendment is the adding of E20 after that last sentence under definitions. So the third is addressed in the district's policy on community use of facilities, parentheses E20.
And does that address the problem that Luke's concerned about, or
Well,
is that a different issue that we're handling, a policy manual or handbook?
So like Juliana's pointing out, some of those issues under the D4 or the D section there is listed. And under administrative responsibilities, there are some things there, yes, that address some of those things, not in the exact same language. So I hear Chris saying that could be addressed procedurally in the handbooks.
Yeah, as much of this could be, I mean,
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to bring it to the board as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
And anyone opposed? No, okay. Okay. All right, moving on to item 6. We don't have any old business on our agenda tonight. Anything for other business? Okay,
Oh, no, I didn't.
all right. Andrea?
Yeah, Sonia had asked that we talk about the one I brought up the other evening, just so I could maybe provide some clarification. So that was last month we discussed policy D23, selection of instructional materials, and had put it on hold, I think waiting for some procedures to be developed. If I recall, I didn't pull up the minutes. And then we said we were going to leave D32, our current policy on selection of instructional materials, in place until we could get procedures for D23. Does that follow the minutes?
So I see, in the parking lot, it says, item B, selection of instructional materials, D23 recommended. VSBA changed it 11/1/22. Replace D32, rescind after adoption.
Right, so with the D23, it said that after discussion, the committee agreed to put this policy on hold until after VSBA has written model procedures.
Right, and that's what it says on the policy index as well.
Right, and so, and it was discussed that, well, it's okay because we already have policy D32 in place. So that was the area of my concern, because on May 5th of 22, VSBA deleted policy D32 because they said, and I'm reading from their site, language in the model policy no longer aligned with statute. So they were deleting it because you don't want policies that do not align with statute. Somehow we missed that last May. We didn't do anything to remove ours. So our current D32 does not align with statute. So they said they were going to, because the language no longer aligned with statute, they were deleting it and they would possibly revisit it at a later date. And they did in November when they came up with the D23. But for the district to keep D32 in force right now, when VSBA has said it's no longer aligned with statute, and the board is supposed to see that all policies are aligned with statute, I'm thinking that it should probably be removed as VSBA recommended to remove it back in May. Does that make sense?
Yep, it makes sense. What do you think about putting it on for February and not removing it until then? Because if we haven't adopted the other one,
That's exactly it. I don't know how we can.
But that was their point, was when they deleted it, hey, you've got a policy that no longer aligns with statute. So your policy isn't meeting the law, and all your policies are supposed to. So when they removed it in November, they said, take it out for now. You know, usually when they find one that no longer aligns with statute, they either fix it right then, they amend it then, or they delete it and come up with a new policy later. And in this situation, they deleted it and then came up with a new one in November. So I guess if the board wants to keep a policy in place that they know is not in line with statute, I guess that, you know, to me, that's kind of a risk.
Well, I don't think anybody wants to do that. I'd be curious what some other districts have done with this in this limbo period of time too. But we can't, it's not like we can adopt this policy tonight anyway.
right.
So,
I mean, my understanding is that VSBA feels it's better off to have no policy than one that goes against the law. But
That was in the minutes, yeah.
Yeah, in the minutes, we talked about, Luke talked about, how the original policy, a lot of discussions put into adding verbiage relating to teaching about controversial sensitive issues, how VSBA removed that verbiage, and that it said there's a difference between materials and teaching practices, suggests that the district may wish to deal with materials and teaching practices in two different policies, using a local policy for teaching practices. So I thought that was, so we were kind of figuring out how to move forward with it. That's why it was put in the parking lot, right?
Can you also have a policy that is stricter than the law? I mean, you can't have a policy that is not as stringent as the law. But if you're more aggressive, is that?
yeah,
Got to meet the minimum standards of the law.
you gotta meet the
Generally
minimum
speaking.
standards.
Like Constitution, you can't give them less rights than Constitution, but Vermont gives you more rights than the U.S. Constitution.
I just don't know if we're in a position right now to just simply decide to take, D32 off our policy page.
So our choices are either to recommend that we send D32 to the board to rescind, or we put the two of them on for February and make a decision going forward with that.
Yeah, a decision has to be made on D23. as soon as possible.
And in a nutshell, why didn't we do it last time? It was on the agenda after that.
So what we said was we were waiting in the policy index, it says, now I've lost track of it. Where's it? That we were holding it until VSBA had written the model procedures to go with it. So, and that has not come up yet.
Yeah, that's the thing. So that's why I wonder what other districts are doing with this dilemma.
Is there anything in from the VSBA that says why it doesn't conform with statute anymore? Do we know that?
Well, what I've got, what they printed on their website, I'll read it verbatim. It says D32, selection of instructional materials, removed 51122, language and model policy no longer aligned with statute. Possibly revisit at a later date. Because they found it didn't meet the law, so better hurry up and pull it.
But they don't say,
What
this,
it is?
Gotta put something in
this has
place.
been my issue with VSBA
Yeah,
all along. And many times they, there's no, they're saying do this, but there's no explanation as to why. That's what,
Or what the option is.
this sheet you're doing, which is very helpful, we were trying to overcome that. That was the whole point. We've
Yeah.
had this problem for years. And here's like, they're saying, what doesn't this whole policy not align with it?
So,
It's just a
and
section.
if we look up D32, the policy is just one sentence. It is the policy of the BUUSD to
Yeah.
provide students with a broad variety of instructional materials to support student learning. And then the whole rest of the policy is the implementation.
Well,
So-
what part of it, because VSBA always looks at it, always does these policies with the implementation as part of it. So is it the policy is wrong or is the implementation part of it?
Well,
We always.
I'm going to jump in. According to VSBA, implementation is part of the policy. They do not consider that to be procedures. They have
Right.
clarified that. It's further defining the policy.
So what's noted is 16 VSA 563.14. That's the
That's the only law
statute that's
defined.
referenced in the policy. It says the superintendent has ultimate authority under 16 VSA 563.14 to preview and approve instructional materials.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we, I would volunteer to check with VSBA as to what they feel is out of compliance with any statute
Okay,
and bring that back.
to committee.
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to put D32 and D, what's the other one? 23
23.
on for February.
I think we have
Yeah.
to,
Luke?
I mentioned at the board meeting, the drug and alcohol policy that's going forward for the second reading, the definition of drugs. So I don't know if we can put that on for February or if that's something we want to talk about so we can make changes before that policy gets fully adopted. Not sure what the order is. I didn't put that on, change the agenda, so I do apologize for that.
I think we should bring that up in February.
So we should hold it back from the board.
We've lost audio again.
It is totally rude.
It is totally Luke. I think actually, wasn't that policy slated for the second reading at the next board meeting?
Yes.
So it's going to be approved next week.
I think that, there we go, we're back on. I think though that we do want to make sure that definition is up to date. And that was,
But
we
there-
just,
Right, but was the issue going back to the VSBA to say, I think Luke said that in the meeting,
Yeah.
like, do we need to go back to them to say, hey, do you realize that you've put this definition in and perhaps like that perhaps like that's on them in terms
Yeah.
of like us not changing it, but like, do they want to make a change to the model policy with that definition on the recommendation of the, what was it, the state police or the police?
yeah.
So is that another
So-
question that we need to ask of VSBA?
I think because it's already gone through the first reading, we should just let it go to the second reading, and then if we have to amend it.
If we have
because
to amend it.
definitions
And in
change,
fact, that's what I thought we
come
were
back to
doing.
committee.
Okay,
Okay, so items for future agenda, we have D23, D32. Alice, you're gonna
Mhm.
check with the VSBA on that.
Yep.
B20, from tonight. We'll keep that at committee. Chris is gonna check with, the lawyer about that one section, and then let's look at the parking lot.
Communicable disease mitigation measures.
Yeah, those two biggies, F27 and E1. I don't think we
Yeah.
have any updates
Not
on,
on E1 yet.
not on E1, so F27. Right, that was the one, maybe you guys remember, we looked at it and it was all the health stuff.
Yeah.
But there were no answers on a lot of those questions about like why certain things were added and others were not.
And any of these under review by VSBA now, ready to be going forward, we just don't know A through L.
I think under review is like, there's, like they're reviewing it, but we don't have an updated
No, so they haven't,
situation yet
so they haven't,
to be able to bring it here.
and things sort of, at VSBA, things sort of get set on a back burner once the legislative session gets underway. Because they're doing a lot of lobbying and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, we were told, like, to Alice's point, Sandra Cameron said, not a lot can be done until June. So, just something to bear in mind.
Yeah,
Because she was gonna come in and do a policy audit.
right, and they
With
said
us.
they would do that in the summer, right?
Yeah,
Is
they
that-
can't,
yeah.
won't be able to do it till summertime or early fall.
Okay, so I think for now, we'll probably just have those three for February.
Yeah.
Tom, did you want to
Sure.
say something?
About something else, point of clarification for Chris on this
Okay.
question about B20.
Okay,
When-
after
when
we
it's
adjourn?
appropriate time.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, all
yeah.
right.
So Chris, we're not doing F27, it's just B as in boy 20, D32 and D23? Or were you doing F27?
Nope, we're not gonna do F27. We don't have any updates.
I didn't think so, okay.
So just those three, B as in boy 20, D23, D32.
Okay, thank you.
And our next meeting will be February 20th at 6 PM here in the Spalding Library and online. And I would look for a motion to
as I
adjourn.
say, before they get to that,
Oh,
I may
sorry.
not, I'm not sure if I'll be here that week is the Berrytown 7th grade boys basketball tournament league, so.
Okay,
I had no idea, we don't have the game scheduled yet, so if my son doesn't have a game, I'll be here. If he does, I will.
gotcha. All right, very good. Well, Rob. Look for a motion to adjourn.
So
Alice for the first and John,
Tim,
Tim, all right, Tim's with a thumbs up for the second. All those in favor
I.
and opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.